Magnavox presents Odyssey, the electronic game of the future. Odyssey easily attaches to any brand TV, black and white or color, to create a closed-circuit electronic playground. Odyssey gives you all the exciting action of hockey and 11 other challenging play and learning games for the entire family. Odyssey, a new dimension for your television, now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
When most people think about the first video game, they think of Pong, the ping-pong arcade game released by Atari in 1972. However, months earlier, Magnavox had released its Magnavox Odyssey, and since the Odyssey had a limited graphical capability and displayed only a few small white blocks and vertical lines on the screen, Magnavox included translucent colour overlays to provide settings and layouts for the games. Perhaps most surprising to many modern gamers is that the Odyssey also came with non-electronic game accessories such as dice, decks of cards, play money, and poker chips. The Odyssey experienced many setbacks during its development and its sales, and despite all of the setbacks, the Magnavox Odyssey made its mark by starting the video game industry. The Odyssey was invented and developed by Ralph Baer, who was born in 1922 to Lotte Kirschbaum and Leo Baer, a Jewish family living in Germany. He was originally named Rudolf Heinrich Baer, and at the age of 14 he was expelled from school because of his ancestry, and he had to go to an all-Jewish school. Baer's family, fearing increased persecution, moved from Germany to New York in 1938, just before the start of World War II. Baer is considered to have been the inventor of video games, specifically of the concept of the home video game console. In 1966, while an employee at Sanders Associates, Baer started to explore the possibilities of playing games on television screens. He first got the idea while working at Laurel in 1951, another electronics company. However, they wanted nothing to do with it at the time. Upon coming up with the idea of creating a game using the television screen, he wrote a 4-page proposal. He was able to convince one of his supervisors to allow him to proceed. He was given US $2,500 and the time of 2 other engineers, Bill Harrison and Bill Rush. They developed the brown box console video game system, so named because of the brown tape in which they wrapped the unit to simulate a wood veneer. This system became jointly owned by Ralph Baer and BAE Systems. In 1971, it was licensed to Magnavox, and after being named the Magnavox Odyssey, the console was released to the public in May 1972.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at this Magnavox Odyssey. We're going to recap it. It's not outputting any signal at the moment, so as the system's 48 years old, I think it will need a little bit of work. Possibly it has been worked on before. Not sure who did it, probably a bit of a gorilla. I've already removed the screws from the case, and as you can see with the board there, the RF shielding has taken a little bit of a beating, so I'm not quite sure what was done there. But on the whole, it's not too bad. Not that many capacitors, 15 in total that we've got to do. We're going to check things like dry solder joints, make sure that everything's good, no loose sockets, and we're going to have a look inside there and see what's going on inside there. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. I have already removed the board. It is a battery operated system. We're getting correct voltage into the circuit board, into the main board. It does have a jack for a AC power supply, which I don't have, so it's going to be run on batteries. And a good thing about this board is that it's kind of modular, so all of these kind of daughter boards that are in here are removable, so with a careful wiggle we can get these boards out, and as you can see, there's various components on there, and we do have a connection on the back which is quite tarnished, so all of these are going to be removed. Some of them have got capacitors on board, so as you can see there, you've got sort of a couple of capacitors, they're dotted around in various places, so we're going to do that. I do have, wherever I've put it, there we go. Ooh, my little 3D printed holder. So I do have these cards, which are virtually identical to the 1UP cartridge cleaning cards that you would use for NES and N64, things like that. And it does come, I would say, cleaning solution, but it is more of a gel, so it stays on. You have one for doing the actual sort of removing of the worst of the dirt, and we have the other one which is much cleaner. So this has been used to do quite a few cartridges, and obviously this is exactly the same concept. We have the contacts there in the socket, and this is exactly how many game cartridges work. And this is quite handy, because if any of these individual boards were to die, you know, I would imagine it's got to be easier to source this one component than everything. We'll get everything powered on, and we'll get to reinstalling the capacitors.
In addition to Odyssey table tennis, other sport games include hockey, football, and skiing. For the youngsters in the family, there's cat and mouse, haunted house, and Simon Says.
Right guys, welcome back. We're getting the old solder sucker heated up. I'm going to try and remove this copious amounts of solder on here. I think, yep, let's go that one. That one I've already done. It's the trouble when somebody else has taken something apart, you never know what they've done, what you're going to find. So anyway, we keep trying. Plug-in board's removed. Does not leave too much. Notice the tails are very long on some of these contacts on the back, and one of the transistors, the contacts were actually crossed on the back, the pins were bent, so I don't know if that was going towards the issues with the board. So, let's see if we can warm this whole area enough to remove this. Let me come this way a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. We're set at about 300 degrees at the moment, so let's see if it can melt all that solder. I mean, even if there is no damage underneath here. There we go, that's one. So now on to the next. So, can't leave that there for a minute to cool down. You can see this shield, this connection, this tape has been removed, but it actually looks okay in there. Yeah, it looks like the socket is slightly bent, but let's say we'll get things apart. Blobs of solder everywhere. But what I think we'll do is we will clean and straighten this up so that this can be put back on just by bending the pins. hate it, especially when it's something that has value like this, and at its age that it's kind of been a little bit butchered. But I suppose, I don't know how long ago that was done. That could have been done 20 years ago, before these were really worth what they are now. I need to remove that solder from there. It doesn't look like there's any damage whatsoever. I'll give the old contacts a clean. Bit too much. Yes, much cleaner. You can see that on the camera there. Okay. So we'll pop that back in. Right. Let's start with this board then. And the first capacitor we have is 16 volts, 470 microfarad, which I think is these two. We have 470 microfarad at 16 volts. So that's that one. Whenever installing capacitors, you have the positive and the negative. The positive is slightly longer. You can see that. But you also have this grey marker, and that always points to the negative side of the capacitor, not the positive. So we'll pop in there. Right, so it's clearly marked on this board. So there's the negative is marked on those two contacts. Also, never touch both contacts at the same time on any capacitor. It doesn't matter how long it's been unplugged or not used. You just never want to risk touching both of those pins together, because it could result in a shock. And if we look on this side of the capacitor, we have this blue line and it says negative. So when this capacitor goes back in, we need to make sure this grey is facing this way. Capacitors, obviously this console is 48 years old, and as time has gone by, the electrolytes and the way things are done has changed, and they've got a lot more efficient and much smaller. So back then, electronics capacitors could be absolutely huge, but nowadays things are obviously just constantly getting smaller and smaller. So when you're installing capacitors, if you ever do this yourself, with the microfarads on the reading here, with this one is 470, that must always be exactly the same as the capacitor that you take out. The voltage, if possible, you need to get the same voltage, but if you say, this is 16 volt, so if you had a 24 volt capacitor at 470 microfarads the same, you could use that, because the voltage must be equal to or higher than the original voltage on the capacitor. And because obviously it stands to reason, if you tried to put, say, 50 volts for a 16 volt capacitor, it's going to pop instantly. So it has to be able to handle the voltage that's going in. I am no way by any stretch of the imagination an expert at soldering. I've picked this up as I've gone along. So we need to be very careful with the pads on the board. We don't want to get massive amounts of heat in there and be unsoldering something we shouldn't. But that's it basically. That's one capacitor removed. And never risk it, never lick a capacitor. So when we input the new one, we're going to pop the legs through, ensuring that our negative is where we need it. and then I generally just give them a little bend, and that stops your capacitor dropping out. So we get our flux. You don't need very much, you don't need to absolutely cover the board with this stuff, it just makes a mess and it's not necessary. And you want a fluxed solder, so let's turn our soldering iron on. We're going to go, I think for about, we'll go for about 300 again. I think that seemed to work well. Sitting just over. Let's have a look what we got. Something on the end already. Right. So just keep the board steady. We just always put a little bit of tin, a little bit of solder on the end, and then just bring that in. Need some solder in. Might need to go up a little bit in the temperature. Not sure where we're going. And might need a little bit more temperature. Nope, not there. We're there eventually. The temperature's equalised. Right, so there we go. A little bit more solder. Right, and there we go. That's the first solder, first capacitor done. Right guys, sorry about that, my GoPro appears to have died, so don't know if you can see this. Just snip them off one at a time, and there we go. And that's one capacitor has been changed. So we'll crack on and do the rest, and I'll be back when I've finished. Right guys, I'm back on this Magnavox Odyssey, and I think I found what the problem was. I'm hoping. I think it is this transistor here on the power line. Sorry about the camera shaking, but I needed to get in close with this, because on here we've got 9 volts roughly coming in from the battery pack. It goes up to the game card slot, and when you put these game cards in, these are actually got the make the contact for the power. So once the game's in, that's basically the on-off switch, and the power goes up to the here, comes back down along this trace, and it comes through. Where are we? Sorry, I'm trying to see around the camera. It comes through this it comes through this resistor, which takes the voltage down to 6.3 volts. According to the schematic, it should be 6.5, but I mean, that's close enough. And it goes through this diode, which obviously keeps the flow in one direction in case, I suppose, you had an issue with the AC power supply if you had one connected. And then it goes into this transistor here, and on the base, which is connected to here, we've got 6.3 volts. On the collector, we've got the 9 volts, 9.2 volts, something like that, coming in here. And on the emitter, we've got no power at all coming from here into the power line to feed the capacitors to actually, sorry about that, I'm trying to focus. We've got no power coming from here because this output emitter leg goes to this capacitor, and obviously we've got no power coming out of here. And what's happening, I think, is that this has got an internal short and it's feeding the power away, because the power is fluctuating up and down on the emitter leg. It will drop right down to 0.2 of a volt, then it will go back up to around 2.3, 2.4 volts and stay there for a little while, and then it will drop back down to sort of 0.2, 0.3 of a volt. And obviously the board itself needs 6.5-ish, somewhere around there, to run, and I think this is kind of sucking the 4 volts out. It's actually draining the power away from this leg. So obviously if the board is only getting 2 volts to power the whole thing, it's just not going to happen. And after changing the capacitors, I did get a picture. It was okay, but it was very flickery, and there was a kind of like it seemed like a lot of noise on the image. So I'm hoping that was just down to, you know, low voltage. Well, this console is getting on for 50 years old, so I've changed all the capacitors, but that, you know, could have stressed other components because they're all the same age. So this transistor, I think, has just give up. So we're going to get this transistor changed and pop in a new one. I've been waiting for these for so long to come, these transistors, it's been ridiculous. But anyway, we're going to get this transistor changed, and then we'll come back and see what the voltage is that we've got after it's been changed. Right guys, we're going to just take a quick look at the bottom of the circuit board. There was quite a few dry solder joints that had to be replaced with fresh solder. There was quite a few big solder joints that was actually touching the solder next to it, which was causing a short. And when I removed some of the larger sort of blobs of solder, there was broken traces underneath. The pads had come off, things like that. So, you know, there's quite a lot of stuff been done. Every single socket's been reflowed in the end because there was just so many different problems. This is underneath the RF shield where it had been damaged on the traces there. So I just had to kind of reconstruct that a little bit to get a good grounding on the RF shield. So overall, it's not been too bad. I'd like to say thank you to Steve, Tom and Charlie at the Wantage Toy Planet in Oxfordshire. They've given me this to repair, and it's going to go back to the shop soon. So this is the first test, and everything seemed to be working okay. I did realise that the bats were actually on the wrong side of the screen eventually because I couldn't hit the ball, I just went through it. And once I swapped the bats to the opposite side of the screen, everything worked okay. So yeah, changing cartridges and it all seems to work as it should. When you insert the game disc, this is actually the power to. So when you pull the game, if you can call it a game cart, they are numbered 1 to 6, and it has various different games. So what have we got here? This is number 3. So if we pop number 3 in, there you go. You can see we've got these 2 paddles here, and for most of these games there will be a screen overlay. Yeah, no sound on the Magnavox. It was a bit before that time, so it's basically Pong. It's just somehow, you know, they've sort of put their heads together at Magnavox when this was created and came up with various games on the same kind of idea, because ultimately you've just got these bats. I've not tried all 6 of the game cartridges. 2 and 3 seem to have the same paddles up, but obviously there may be different screen overlays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the desk and that cleared, because it's a bit messy where I've been doing RC stuff, because I've got an RC over there in pieces because I've been waiting for parts for that. This is just a bit messy. I've been kind of using it as a dumping ground while I've been soldering and charging batteries, so this all needs to be cleared off, and then we'll we'll sort of crack on and I'll show all of the stuff. I'm going to look back through the previous videos, but I'm really happy with that now. As I pop these in, it comes straight up, so I'm really happy with that. Let's bring that paddle down. Oh, not that one. Bring that paddle down and we can get some pong going. It'll play with itself. There you go. So anyway guys, I hope you found this video interesting. The guy that owns this is going to be really excited to get this back now, because he does actually have the shooting gallery expansion for it, the accessory. So you know, he's going to be quite excited to get this going. And I think, you know, running it off a power supply against batteries is not going to be a bad thing, because at least the power supply is constant. He's not going to suffer with the sort of slow drop off in voltages, because this hardware seems to be a little bit sensitive to voltage. If it does start to drop off at all, it just causes a major problem. So if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Rounding out your Odyssey game series are such challengers as Submarine, Roulette, Analogic, and Geography. Each Odyssey game comes complete with all equipment necessary for play, whether it's one of the 12 standard games or one of several optional games, which include a special shooting gallery complete with gun and 4 target overlays. Depending on your hunting skills, you can choose between sitting or moving targets.